So hi everyone, and welcome to the very first Nature Journal Club Writing Workshop Wednesday. My name is Rebecca, and with an E, Rolnick, and I'm so excited to have you all here. I'm starting this workshop because I thought it would be really nice to have a place in the nature journaling community where we could all focus on words and the writing aspect of our journals. And I think there's a wide range of experience levels here with this. So I'm really excited. I think that we can all learn from each other and grow our skills as nature journalers and as scientists and explorers. So a lot of you have already introduced yourself in the chat. Thank you. So does everyone have the materials that you need? You can give a thumbs up if you're ready. Great. So today, to start off with the first one, I'm basically going to be taking us through the activity Writing to Observe and Writing to Think from John Muirlaw's book, How to Teach Nature Journaling. But if you've done this activity before, I think it'll be a little different, just all doing it together in real time and discussing it. And there are a couple of things I'm changing too. So to start off, and you can respond to this, you can raise your hand to speak, or you can write in the chat. What do you think of when you hear the word writing? Melissa? Thinking on paper, scribbles, Dungeons and Dragons. Documenting something, putting thoughts, experiences, and activities down on paper, high school English, stories and books, documenting stuff. Yeah, those are all good answers. Work, someone says, recording events, creating, putting pen to paper. Yeah, so there are a bunch of different things that come to mind when you think about writing. And grabbing a pencil and writing words on paper. Yes. So there are a lot of different things that we think about. And so for some people, we might think more about the communicating aspect of writing, like someone writing in an English class, writing something more formal that you have to present to other people. But what I want us to realize here is that it's not just writing to communicate, it's also writing as a process that can help us to think more deeply about the things that we're observing. And so when we're doing writing in our nature journals, things that often we might tend to focus on, like grammar and spelling, or thinking about whether our writing is good or not, doesn't really matter so much here, but it's more about how we can use writing as a tool to help us be better observers. Okay, a few more people just got here. So we're just starting off talking about what is writing and what do we think about when we talk about writing. A quote that I really like about writing is from the book Bird by Bird, Some Instructions on Writing in Life. It says, one of the gifts of being a writer is that it gives you an excuse to do things, to go places and explore. Writing motivates you to look closely at life as it lurches by and tramps around. So this quote is more about writing fiction and things like that. But I think it shows that writing goes really well together with nature journaling because it's all about exploring, trying new things, and just paying really close attention to what's going on around us. And so it's part of nature journaling, and writing can help us to write about our own experiences and thoughts, and it can help us to think like a scientist. A lot of scientists use writing in their journals to help develop their ideas and record their experiences. So does anyone recognize any of the scientists and naturalists journals on this page? Yeah, so I think someone recognized this one. So Rosalind Franklin is the one, she helped discover DNA. None of these are hers though, actually. So this one, you're right, is Darwin. So this is a pretty famous nature journal page because it's when he was thinking about the idea of the tree of life and how all different organisms have evolved. So you can see the words I think, and then this little diagram, and then writing about it. So he did observations about all the different plants and animals that he found on his travels around the world. But he didn't just observe what he saw in front of him. He also used writing to help him think really deeply about why he was seeing what he was seeing, and helped him to learn more about nature in a deeper way. This one, it's kind of hard to read from the picture, but this one is from one of Aldo Leopold's nature journals. And so he's a really famous conservationist in the United States, or well, he was. And the ones on the left are the journals from Lewis and Clark's expedition back in the 1800s. So they recorded a lot about their travels, and they weren't really scientists per se, but they were naturalists in that they learned a lot about everything that they found when they were on their expedition. So the activity we're doing today is based on, it kind of builds upon the activity I notice, I wonder, it reminds me of, which is a pretty popular activity among nature journalers. So does anyone here who's done it before, would anyone like to try explaining what that means for anyone who doesn't know it? Terry?
Um, it's something that we use all the time with poetry teaching, and even in the classroom with trying to get ideas from kids, using the five senses. So noticing is obviously seeing. Wondering is a fun new one. And then it reminds me of is obviously a metaphor or simile. So very poetic way of walking into it.
Yeah, so I notice exactly it's about making observations with your five senses. So not just sight, but also hearing, smell, taste, and touch. I wonder is all about asking questions. And it reminds me of is making connections between different things. And that's a big part of being creative. So it can be something that it reminds you of in a more literal sense, but that can also help us to develop metaphors. So these can help us think about different types of writing for different purposes. So writing to observe is when we can use the phrase I notice. Writing to think is when we can use I wonder and it reminds me of. And then I think it's also useful to separate out writing to reflect or to express our emotions. So thinking can be trying to understand something that's outside of us, but writing to reflect, we can turn inwards and write about our own experience. And we could start that sentence with I feel. So I'm going to ask all of you again, what kind of observations do you think we might be able to record using some of these different types of writing? Because we can record different types of information and go at different levels of depth. So using labels, bullet points, sentence fragments, shorter sentences, and then full paragraphs. Melissa?
So one thing that you could, if I understand the question right, I think one thing that you could know, something that it prompts you to remember that you've either that you associate that thing with or that you've observed elsewhere.
Yeah, you could use
the sort of, this sort of answer you were looking for?
So I guess to clarify, for each one of these different things, what are some different types of information that we might be able to record using, like what could we record using labels versus bullet points versus sentence fragments, for example. But you're absolutely right. We can use all of these to record things that it reminds us of.
I do not know how to lower my hand. There we go. Sorry.
That's all right. Jen, do you have something to add?
Yeah, what I kind of looked at it is a label I could use perhaps underneath a bird to say, you know, yellow rumped warbler, but a paragraph, on the other hand, I might use to say how I feel about that. So it's kind of a different, it's a gradation, you know, the yellow rumped warbler, warbler class found in such and such sentence fragments. But as I get closer to the paragraphs, I'm getting more close to what feels like self-expression in a way.
Yeah, that definitely can be part of it. We can just use, sometimes it can be hard to start writing because we feel like everything has to be perfect right away, or we have to have a fully formed, complete thought. But it doesn't have to be. We can just use little labels pointing to things, or not even a full sentence, a few words here and there to write about what we notice, or a little fragment of an idea. But then when we get to paragraphs, it can be a more fully thought out thing. So here's just, oh, Amy?
Oh, I was gonna say, you kind of talked about it. Like if I'm looking at a bird, for example, you know, I might, just to get going with it, start by labeling what I notice about the bird. What kind of beak shape is it? What colors? Do they have wing bars? And just really start easing into it by just seeing what you're physically observing. And then the bullet point phrases are maybe what it's doing. So it's feeding on insects or something like that. Like that's how I like to start with it. I'm not necessarily a creative, like jump in to the writing part of it. Like you said, I'm more, you know, I'm looking at the physical aspects first and labeling those, then maybe graduate into like what is it about the things that I'm noticing that I can start wondering about, I guess.
Yeah.
And I was gonna say that a lot of times I find myself using short sentences and paragraphs when I'm more in a storytelling mode. Like I saw, if I'm just labeling and documenting things briefly, then I'll use the labels and bullet points and things. But if something surprising happens and it sort of turns into a little story of this bird that started doing these crazy things, then it tends to go into a longer spurt of writing. And sometimes it'll also be like I might have a page with one little drawing, and then the whole rest of it is just sort of how I'm feeling and kind of what mindset I have that day, and questions about, you know, more philosophical wonderings and things.
Yeah, so we have kind of an interplay between these two different types of writing to be a scientist, to learn things, and then the storytelling aspect. And what are we thinking about in a more deep way, or what's our personal connection to it? And we can use both of those types of thinking in our nature journals. So here's an example of this activity that I did this weekend from a little shell that I have. So you can see I did a little quick sketch, nothing really fancy or involved like a lot of the pictures on the Facebook page, but just a quick little outline. And then I have some labels pointing to different aspects of the shell, some bullet points over here, and then just kind of a stream of consciousness writing out. Again, this isn't really like, this did kind of turn into like a big paragraph, but it's not really like a paragraph I would write in, say, an essay or something I wanted to show to people. It's more just a stream of consciousness, what I was thinking about and observing. So here are a few sentence starters that you might use if you're writing to observe. We already talked about I notice. If you're out exploring with a group, you might say, we saw this, and go into more detail. Or if you're describing a series of events, you might say, first, this happened, and then this happened. So right now, let's take 10 minutes, if everyone has your paper and pen or pencil and something to observe. So you can do a quick sketch like this, and then focus on the I notice, making observations. So the goal right now, again, it's not to communicate or to write in a really pretty way or to have perfect grammar, but just our whole goal right now is to learn about what's in front of us and to use writing as a tool to help us pay attention. So the challenge right now is, how much can you learn about your object in 10 minutes? So I'm going to put a timer on, and in 10 minutes, we'll all come back together. And I'll be doing this along with you too. I have this leaf here that I'm going to be observing. And if you have any questions or you need anything, you can feel free to send me a message in the chat. All right, ready? Oh, Jen, do you have something to say, or do you just still have your hand up? All right, ready, set, go. 1 minute left. Okay, so that was 10 minutes. How did that go for everyone? Was it hard to write for that long, or did you keep finding more things to notice? Okay, so next we move on to writing to think. So we already talked a little bit about writing to think, but what kind of thinking or ideas might we be able to describe using our journals? So writing to observe, we're trying to learn directly about what's right in front of us. But writing to think is more about thoughts and ideas, being creative. So here's this chart again. Writing to think, moving from I notice to I wonder, asking questions, being curious. And it reminds me of making connections between different kinds of things. And you could also write about how it makes you feel, or your emotions, or your personal experience, more of that kind of storytelling aspect. So some things that you might use when writing to think could include asking questions, I wonder, like I just said, and it reminds me of thinking about not just asking questions, but thinking about what some of the possible explanations or answers might be. Writing some personal notes or reflections. You also might do a little metacognition, think about thinking, write about the process that you used while making observations, about how this process is going for you, using bullet points, sentences, and how you feel. So let's take 10 minutes again to focus on writing to think. Does anyone have any questions? So writing to think and to feel. And you can focus on whatever is interesting to you. So if you want to jump back and forth between all the different kinds of writing, you can feel free to do so. If you get stuck, you can try making some more observations, or you can try using I notice, I wonder, it reminds me of, and turning it inward on yourself. So does that sound good to everyone? Does anyone have any questions? Yes, on the same object, but writing about it in a different kind of way. All right, ready, set, go. Okay, that was another 10 minutes. So how did this go for everyone? So the next part of the activity is to use all your notes and what you've written so far to write out a whole paragraph. And if you haven't done the turning inward part yet, or the writing to reflect, you could focus on that. But for the sake of time right now, I think let's skip over that to make sure that we have a chance to discuss, and so that after this, everyone who wants to share can have a chance to do so. So from the chat, felt like inspiration came in waves, suddenly get a few ideas all at once. Yeah, I noticed that happens sometimes for me too. It can feel like we've learned everything there is, there's really nothing more here, but if we just spend a little bit more time with it, suddenly there's more that can come to us. So how did all of this writing help you to observe more closely or to clarify your thinking and what you thought about it? And again, if you'd like to respond to this, you can raise your hand or you can type in the chat. So it's from a few more comments in the chat. At first, I thought there wouldn't be much to say, and then yes, I noticed something new. I liked writing about the memories of the object I was describing and also researching facts and learning about it. I found so many questions emerging the more time I spent with my object. Lots of questions. Yeah, so it sounds like we've got a great mixture of ideas, thoughts, questions, memories, personal experiences. I was able to freely write down more ideas to further research the plant origin and find sources of info. Pretty surprised that I was able to find so much and have a lot of questions. I really didn't think I would write so much. I relate to that a lot. And yeah, I like how some of you are saying this is giving you a basis to do more research and find out more about your object. So like I'm writing about a leaf, and I think I know what species it is, but I'm not completely sure. So I'm going to look it up afterwards. But by observing it and writing about it on my own first, that helps me to learn more about it than if I just already knew what it was and thought, oh yeah, it's this. End of the learning. Comforting and interesting writing is a strong connection to nature. Sometimes limit my writing because my journal is small. I feel like more art makes a prettier page. And that's true. Art does make our pages really pretty. Like even the example of scientist journals that I showed earlier, it's not really like as pretty as the others, but it can still be a really useful tool and a way to help us explore and to learn more. Thank you, Jackie. Glad you enjoyed the session. So another question that you could think about is how might you use writing in the future in your nature journal as a tool to help you observe and to think and to remember? So Terry says you can make a design of the writing. So yeah, that's true. A lot of sometimes in your nature journal, you could use writing in a more of an artistic way, and that can visually help you to look at the information when you look back at it. So I think that's something that's great that you can do. But also, I think it can be great sometimes to not worry about that while you're in the process of doing it and just let yourself write whatever you want without having. I think sometimes if we focus too much on the visual design, we're not thinking so much about our actual thoughts. So both are good ways for sure. It just depends on what you want to focus on in the moment. Would like to do more imaginative story writing and write facts while I'm learning. Yeah, that's a great idea. And that's something I'm hoping that we can cover here at some point. Our observations from nature can be the basis of a story and some more imagination. Do this writing exercise on a separate piece of paper and then transfer it to the journal so you can map it around your artwork. That is a really good idea. I think I'll try that too. So if you could use writing as a tool to help you learn about any topic you want, and it doesn't have to be science or nature, what would you choose? Traveling? Yeah. And that fits pretty well with nature and with science, but it doesn't have to be connected to them. Two journals, one for quick observations and one to refine and incorporate artwork. Yeah, that's a good option too. All right, so is there anyone who would like to share what you wrote today? You could either read some of your writing or show us your page and what it looks like, or you could just share what's something interesting that you learned about your object that you hadn't noticed before doing this activity. Amy Szymanski?
So what I noticed is I have this pine cone that I found in town. And if you look at it on one side, it's fairly flat. But then as you turn it, those protrusions get a lot larger in that one area. And so I ended up just having a lot of questions about the pine cone and its development and what's going on with it. But one of the things that I noticed at the very end was that when I turned it in this view, it looks like a hedgehog.
Oh yeah, I see that.
So I just thought that was kind of fun.
Yeah, it's a really good connection. Melissa?
My son asked me to show his journal page for him.
Mhm.
I don't know if y'all can see it, but he found it handy. There we go. He found it handy to make boxes to map out his different ideas and notes.
Oh, I really like that.
Thanks.
So
He says thanks.
So every thought is in its own little box?
Yes, every thought has its own box. And there are boxes for the sketches as well.
I like how you did that.
He's really glad everybody likes it.
Thank you for sharing. Do you
He
want to
says
tell
you're
us
welcome.
do you want to tell us anything else about your journal page?
Come on back. Oh, it's okay.
Yeah, Heather, it's like a comic book.
Anything else?
No, I'm too tired.
Were you inspired by comic books to make those boxes?
No, I just thought of making boxes.
That's what we got.
Thank you for sharing. Would anyone else like to share? And I can also have a little bit of time after I turn off the recording if you'd like to share without it being recorded in the video. Alexandra?
Are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I was actually journaling on a feather that I found in my side yard. And early on, I was just making very literal observations. But I found in the writing part, I kind of moved very quickly into feelings, such as the fact that I don't see the turkeys in my yard like I used to. And I wonder why. And I miss them. And it was quite a trigger for, it went down a path of a lot of memories, not just about the observation of this one, but about other memories and occasions where I was observing the turkeys in places that I went. And I found myself kind of getting into free writing from it about those memories. And it felt like the turkey feather was a starting point. And then I went way off down the rabbit hole in other directions. So that was how I ended up being with it.
I really like how the one feather ended up being opening up this whole thing for you. It's not just observing nature like a scientist, but what are our stories and how are we a part of nature and what's our connection to it? So thank you for sharing that. Okay, I see Jen has a hand up.
Yeah, I found, well, two things. I found that I wandered into the how I feel in the first exercise as well a bit. I have a Chinese elm that is right outside my window down in Southern California. And as I wrote the second one, though, I really kind of dived into the resilience of that, those sets of Chinese elm that are here. I can see new shoots coming out that already, even in February. And a blue jay kind of popped in, or I guess it was a scrub jay, kind of popped in and hopped around on the branches a little bit just to give me something else to look at. But, and just that sense of what the tree's trying to, well, it's not trying to communicate. What it communicates to me is that feeling of hope and steadfast confidence that in the middle of all the chaos around us, the green shoots still form, the old leaves still shed, and the tree continues, which I think was a really important message for me.
I love that. I think there's a lot that we can learn from nature, because as scientists, we generally are taught that, we're not supposed to put in our feelings, just observe objectively, but we really need both.
And to the lady with the turkeys, if the turkeys have recently disappeared, it's time for, it's just after mating season, and the wild turkeys often will, especially the hens, will disappear for a month or two. And then you may be flooded with new ones in another couple months. So have hope.
All right, so if anyone would like to share after I turn off the recording in a minute, I can stay for a little bit longer. I just want to let you know next time we're going to be taking a look at a part of the book, The Sense of Wonder by Rachel Carson, and talking about what makes us feel a sense of wonder. So thank you again for coming. I'm really excited to have you all here. I'm glad that a lot of you enjoyed it. I have ideas for, I have the first several weeks planned out for this workshop, and I have a big list of ideas for after that, but I would really like this to be what everyone would like it to be and what everyone needs so that we can learn. So if you have ideas, feel free to let me know. There's also an event going on tomorrow. I'm not affiliated with this and I don't really know much about it, but I thought it sounded really interesting and I'm going to go to it. So I wanted to let you know. And it's about the intersection between science and literature for teachers and educators. So thank you all for coming to the first Writing Workshop Wednesday in the Nature Journal Club, and I hope I'll see you again another time.